Hey everyone! Today on Tiny Voices, we're going to stroll down the glowing streets of memory lane and learn a little bit about nostalgia. That and more today on Tiny Voices. Once upon a time, nostalgia, that rosy sense of sentimentalism for the past, or those bittersweet pangs for days gone by, was considered to be a mental illness. The term was originally coined by Swiss medical student Johannes Hofer in his dissertation. By his definition, nostalgia was a kind of pathological longing. Today we have a more measured understanding of nostalgia, although there's still a lot left to uncover about it. And though our medium is young, it's more than old enough to drum up warm and fuzzy feelings from the past. Wistful memories of discovering the Hadouken in Mega Man X, of opening up that Christmas present with a PlayStation inside, of coming home from the store and popping in your first Final Fantasy. Gaming is plenty old to engender those kind of fond, nostalgic memories. And the industry trades on nostalgia very frequently. Mighty No. 9 inherently banks on collective nostalgia for the Mega Man games that we aren't getting anymore. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night does the same for Metroidvanias that harken back to Symphony of the Night. Yooka-Laylee fills an emotional gap left by the absence of a new Banjo-Kazooie game. The Year of Dreams was a term coined last year following a string of throwbacks, revivals, and a good helping of Sony dropping nuclear bombshells at their E3 conference. The Last Guardian resurfaced, Shenmue 3 got announced, and the long-awaited Final Fantasy VII Remake announcement brought fans to tears and made grown men delirious with euphoria. Personally, I freaked out later that year during the Game Awards when Psychonauts 2 was announced. I literally became teary-eyed. I freaked out years prior when a familiar ice cream truck rolled onto the stage at E3 to herald the return of Twisted Metal. I'm sure we all have a story like that, one that is entirely fueled by nostalgia. Already this year has seen some nostalgia-related controversy when Blizzard finally managed to shut down a group of pirate World of Warcraft servers running a classic build of the game, and then turned around and said they were in talks with the creators of those servers for a Pristine Realms project, which sounds a lot like those classic servers people have been pining for so long. Young as this medium might be, it's perfectly old enough to engender nostalgia in us. And so it's worth understanding nostalgia itself. And to do so, it's also important to understand something about how our memories work. There are three main stages of memory: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding happens when you attend to an event, and sensory information from that event is transduced into something that your brain can work with, namely chemical electrical signals that result in neuronal firing. So you experience an event, and specific sets of neurons fire in a specific pattern. Storage is more or less just what it sounds like, storing both short-term and long-term memories. There's an important caveat here, and it also applies to the next part, memory retrieval. And it's that memories are not stored like files on a computer, nor are they retrieved like that. It's not really that clean or perfect of a process. Anyway, memory retrieval occurs when you remember something or try to do so. You could fill volumes talking about memory, the stages of memory, all of the surrounding tangential topics. It is a big, complicated field of study that is not even entirely fleshed out yet. There is still a lot of research to come. That said, to just get a basic gist of it, we're on our way. So our good old friend, the amygdala, that almond-shaped cluster in our temporal lobes, which plays a big role in emotional processing, can mediate and prioritize which events are encoded in the hippocampus, which, among other things, we understand plays a pretty huge role in storing short-term memories and converting them to long-term memories. And we know this because of lesion studies. If the hippocampus is damaged, then it becomes next to impossible to form new short-term memories, although events from the distant past are still able to be recalled. So anyway, in other words, events which trigger heightened states of emotional arousal produce more vivid feeling episodic memories because of the interaction between the amygdala and the hippocampus. Now, this is obviously important when talking about nostalgia because we don't tend to wax nostalgic about the utterly boring and mundane. The emotional content of the memory is vital in eliciting a sense of nostalgia. The other important thing to understand about memory, and that caveat earlier kind of covered what I'm about to say, The actual retrieval process is not perfect. Your neurons are firing at a pattern approximating their firing pattern from when you first experienced the event, when you recall a memory. Think of it like walking through the sand and then doubling back and retracing your steps. You might come pretty close to following the same path the first time through, but you're going to leave a slightly different impression in the sand with each step, and it's going to become increasingly distorted each time you try to retrace those steps. Memory retrieval is an imperfect process. Save for a select few, our memories aren't photographic or anything even close to that. Every time you retrieve a memory, you aren't actually retrieving it like a file from a hard drive, but recreating it. Which goes a long way in explaining, for instance, why eyewitness testimony is so lousy and unreliable. And because that process is imperfect, things can interfere with our recollection, including our favorite word, cognitive biases. This is how nostalgic preferences are created. Carnegie Mellon University published a study analyzing how we rate TV shows from the past compared to those of the present, and demonstrated a positivity effect biasing the memories of participants. Essentially, they remembered their favorite shows from the past, failed to remember the terrible shows, but when rating the present, they accounted for both the good and the bad together. The lead author of the study, Carrie Morwidge, said that memory seems to operate much like a record store, stocking the hits of the past and both the hits and the stinkers of the present. Rather than recognize this bias, however, we mistakenly believe that what we remember is representative of the entire category of experience, giving rise to nostalgic preference. As for why we become nostalgic, that's also kind of hard to answer definitively. Some research indicates that nostalgia gives us a pleasant anchor point that we can return to when we're feeling low. What researchers also found accompanies nostalgia is a narrative that we've constructed to frame ourselves or past circumstances in a positive light, whether that be because the event was celebratory and momentous, or because we in our mental retelling of events overcame some kind of adversity. It helps to improve our self-image, a very practical benefit of nostalgia. Nostalgia also tends to be extremely potent when the memory is about socializing. And your warm reminiscence isn't just a boon to you and your self-image, marketers love it too. Studies show that you're more willing to pay a higher price for a product when in the throes of wistful nostalgia. And they're good at using all sorts of cues, from fonts to sound effects to imagery to music, to transport you back to a place that might make you more willing to open up your wallet. But why does this all matter in games specifically? Like, aside from the above, games trade in nostalgia pretty frequently, not just through audio-visual cues, but mechanical ones too. There's an extra dimension of nostalgia to consider. Let me give a few personal examples. Getting the claw shot in Twilight Princess conjures up all of these wonderful euphoric memories of zipping around with the Ocarina of Time hookshot. Landing an uppercut in Mortal Kombat X brings me right back to spamming that thing against my brother in Mortal Kombat 2 on our Super Nintendo. Every game that has a good dash, a very general thing, transports me right back to the golden days of yore playing Mega Man X for the first time. Something that I personally always wax nostalgic over is how much Dark Souls' messaging system and the community that's blossomed around the game reminds me of sharing secrets and swapping stories with my friends on the playground during recess or after school. My rose-tinted past experiences are actively coloring my current evaluation of the game in that instance. In other words, nostalgia baked into the game mechanics is giving a rich meaning to something that I'm experiencing in the present. In the endless debate about whether nostalgia is killing creativity or taking us on a fantastic, rose-colored journey, this is often a side of the argument that gets ignored. Designing nostalgia into the mechanics of the game to add a new meaningful dimension to it. And that's why I wanted to cover this topic on Tiny Voices. So that about does it for today. Nostalgia is a really huge, complicated beast, and it's kind of impossible to cover it exhaustively in a paltry little 5 to 10 minute video. So don't be surprised if the subject comes up again down the road with a different angle. Consider this something of a really basic primer bookended with a novel perspective on how nostalgia can be a force for good. Anyway, next week is the season finale, so I'll see you then. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take it easy. Have a good one.